Perfect. Right. Sending a warm welcome to Dr. Papaarangi Reid no Te Rarawa, Sao Maui, Leonie Pihama no Tiatiawa, Waikato Tainui, me Taranaki Iwi, Mereana Pitman no Ngāti Kahununu, Rongo mai Wāhine, me Nai Tā Manuhiri, and Annette Sykes no Ngāti Pikiao, Ngāti Mākino, Ngāti Awa me Tuhoi. Nei au te mihi mai oha i ngā rangatira, no mai haere mai ki tēnei kaupapa. I'll hand over to Papaarangi first now to begin our kōrero whaia. How has Moana influenced your work and life? Let's.
Te mea tuatahi he mihi mahana kia tātou katoa e hui hui mai nei i runga i te mano tēnei kaupapa nō reira e hoa mā tēnā koutou katoa. That's a really big question. I was freaking out yesterday when people asked when did they first meet Moana, and luckily a gentleman here knew, because I couldn't remember, that he came with Moana to talk to me about Depo Provera in the 80s, when I thought that we were not getting full informed consent about some of the medications we were getting as Māori women. So, and even though today is really a focus on the criminal justice system, I really want to focus on the fact that he has been very active in Māori health and our rights in Māori health. So I guess that has been a major influence on us. I want to mihi to Pat Grace, Patricia. I really enjoyed reading your contribution to the book last night, and because I did want to talk about his relationship with Irihāpiti Ramsden and the strength that he helped give her when leading kaua whakaruru hau in the face of blatant racism, and really, you know, we're seeing it revived now in every political cycle. But yeah, he was the mainstay of her trying to make the health system safer for us as Māori. So he has been ever present in Māori health for a long time, and so apologies to the criminal justice system, but I did want to flick over to the health system as well. And I also felt that his thinking, like I have to also mention my other colleague, Rhys Jones, Cohen's brother, who won't let me have a microphone in front of me without mentioning the climate crisis that we're in. And so you can report back that I'm doing as I'm told. Because the solution is in Indigenous thinking and in Indigenous values and Indigenous principles. And I just want to, I want to take something from that. There's some people in marketing are trying to work out how we get through issues in climate, and they've worked out this four little things that you say. It's real, it's us, human caused, it's bad, but there's hope. And so I think the lesson for Mātiki Mai is it's real, it's big, it's up to us, and we are the hope. And just thinking of Panya Newton yesterday and the occupation at Ihumatao, and Moana's strength and support again offered there. But one of the, there was a dyed bed sheet on the fence there, and it said, "We are our ancestors' wildest dreams." And I think that stands for his, the relationship with Moana was, you know, he inspired us to be, you know, what people said yesterday, be brave, use imagination, and get out of our comfort zone. I had the privilege of helping him be a navigator in his last illness, a navigator through the complex health system, and that was, that was a really important part of my life, and mihi to his whānau for allowing me to be part of that. And I think that's my 5 minutes.
Prudent to acknowledge the contributions Moana made to many spaces and acknowledge that he was also active in the Māori health system, fighting for Māori rights within that space and working to make it a safer space for Māori.
Tēnā koutou. Tūtoka au nā mihi kua mihia I te ata nei. Kia tātou katoa I huhui mai nei. Hiahi au ki te mihi ki ngā pūkauai, ngā moko kauai I roti te rūma. Tiro haere au ki tēnei o nā wāhine. Whaka, he kauai, te katoa. You know, yeah, I did. I've just been, even 5 years ago, we wouldn't have sat as a panel of 5 women with kauai. And when Moana talked at one of our conferences, and he had all these ethics, he had a lot of ethics, because he was fundamentally an incredibly ethical person. And one of them was the ethics of imagination. And I think that is something that's come for our tupuna, and koe te whakatinana here o era moimoia, you know, that my experience with Moana is his ability and his capacity to share that desire of moimoia, of imagination, of vision, of not accepting that where we are is where we should be or where we will be tomorrow. And so seeing so many pū kauai, moko kauai, sitting together here talking about him, really for me is the personification of that ethic of imagination, that ethic of vision. And as I do always, I urge all wāhine Māori to mau moko kauai. It is ours as a right. It is of our tupuna, and we don't need permission from anybody. And then he will ki ngā mea tāne, mo te mataora. You fellas are coming a bit slow in the back here. So one way, kia whakatinana hea te mātiki mai, mau mataora, mau moko kauai. Where the āhuatanga o nā mātua tūpuna. I too read quite a few of the articles in the book last night because I was very excited. I was excited about the cover. I'm always excited about Robin Kahukiwa covers. And I also read yours, Pat, Ngā mihi ki a koe, I te mā reikura. But all of the contributions of those who met Dean and Hinemoa around meeting Moana in that very first mahi. And I got a little bit nervous because, you know, I also can't remember when I met Moana, and I have a terrible memory anyway, but I just know, and I wrote in my piece, that he's just kind of always been there. And in many ways, I remember first hearing about the UN Declaration stuff, and he was there, knowing Deb Harry, who was there, a Paiute woman, the fiscal envelope work, when we did this extremely long video with Annette that really challenged the Crown, and he was there, and Moana was there, Mereana was there. And for me, Moana's been a part of this kind of tira. And in Mātiki Mai, one of the things I've learnt from him is that we shouldn't take parts of things. I'm a words person. I loved how he defined words. I loved how he talked about words. He challenged us on words as a researcher, constantly challenging us to find the knuckle of a word before we go ahead and use it. We should always know the genealogy of something before we use it and not do this kind of part-taking of bits. So when I read in Mātiki Mai, and I remembered the other day, you know, he te kai o te rangatira he kōrero, which we say a lot, but the other part of it, he tohu o te rangatira he manaaki. Te mahi o te rangatira kia whakatira te iwi. You know, thinking about things in their fullness and that kind of influence for all of us when we think about things in their fullness means that we're not going to do this superficial part thing and that was a constant challenge to us. I mean, I'm also, located in the education and research context. And when we do that, when he spoke at He Manawa Whenua, and he talked about those ethics, but he'd also talked to us before about the word research. And in Linda's work in decolonising methodologies, we know that research is one of the, most overused words in terms of Indigenous people and most distrusted words, and we have every right to do that. But he reminded us that the fundamental meaning of that word is to seek out, to investigate, to search. And then what does that mean for us? Is that something that our tupuna did? And if it was something our tupuna did, then it's something that we do. And they did. We always researched, but we had a particular kind of research. And if we didn't do it in a particular way with the 10 ethics, which he said were not the 10 commandments, but they kind of became that, because, once Moana did his 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 or 1 to 12, in a conference, that became the theme of the conference for the entire period of being together. But in those ethics were ethics of prior thought, which is really kia maunga ki ngā āhutanga ngā whakaaro ngā mātaranga o ngā mātua tūpuna. And the way that they were put enabled us to challenge our work. So for me it was a constant challenge, but also someone who was constantly there and available and generous. And, I too acknowledged all, the whānau, because that generosity I know sometimes takes time away from your whānau. But it also in many ways gives back, because it's giving back to the next generations for change. The other thing, and I want to pick up on the climate change very briefly, not because of Reid, but because of the kōrero yesterday around that challenge that would come when we're talking about something that we think is really obvious, and then one would say something like, well, what about the hapa without land? That kind of kōrero. And the need to think into the future. Mātiki mai is about being futuristic. Our tupuna have always been futuristic. Te Tiriti o Waitangi was a futuristic document. It wasn't about the tupuna of the time, it was about us and generations yet to come. And on the climate change thing, I had a quick chat with Annette yesterday. In Taranaki, we're very aware that in the future, hapu even with land now may not have land. Why? Because we're a coastal people, and people in the Tairāwhiti are experiencing much of this now. The assumptions that we have now may not be what we have in the future, but also we live under a maunga that's ready to erupt at any point in time. So I said to Annette, just remember, where did Taranaki go when we had our last crisis? No reira, me atu ki a koutou nā whanaunga o. Ngāti Raukawa, ngāti tō rangatira. Me te Aotearoa ki a koutou Pat Anima. But that's what I mean. The idea of the future, that an imagination, I think, that Moana talked about, wasn't about tomorrow. It wasn't about that. It was about moving forward into a whole range of possibilities. Tēnā koutou.
Mereana.
Kia ora tātou katoa. Tēnei te mihi atu kia tātou katoa. Ngāti Raukawa, whatarangi kia koe whatarangi. Kei te mihi nui kia koe whata. Te haukainga, Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Toa, Te Aotearoa, tēnā koutou, ngā hoa, ani, heitia. This is a bit freaky coming back here. Last time, when I first came here in 1998, two things struck me. First thing that struck me was that I was in a class full of law and philosophy students, there were about 70 of us, and we went to have dinner at the dining room, which is the same one as it is now, except it was only one room. And then Whata told us that we had to go and wash the dishes in a tent at the back of the dining room. And I thought, but we didn't come here to do the dishes. We came here to learn about Māori law and philosophy. And here we were, 75 of us, doing the dishes out the back. The other thing that has really struck me about being back here is it's just changed so much. And it's beautiful to see that it's grown so much. It's really lovely to see that it's still probably the cleanest university or Wānanga that I've ever been in. And that it still has fantastic kai. So, Moana Jackson. I might cry over the next hour or so, sometime. Moana was my friend and my mentor. He mentored me through a lot of things. I first met Moana. It was this, I went to teach one day at Waipatu marae, and that was one of his marae. And this man came, nice looking, which is par for the course for tairawhiti. Now, tairawhiti doesn't do ugly. So this nice looking man turned up at the back of the room, at the back of the wharetupuna at Waipatu is a doorway, you can get out the back. And he's just leaned up against the door and he was watching and listening. I didn't actually know who he was. And by lunchtime, he had made it to the seats where people were seated. And he was leaning forward and then he started asking me these really complex questions. And I thought he was a bit of a smartass. And then, so we went and had lunch. And when I came back from lunch, there were these two mattresses lying in front of the microphone and table. And he was lying on them like this with his hand in his head like this, looking up at me as I was teaching and continued to ask me really difficult questions about te tiriti or waitangi and the treaty. After dinner, I met up with him and I asked somebody who he was over dinner and they said, oh, that's Moana Jackson. And I went, and Moana Jackson? Who's Moana Jackson? Oh, he runs the Wellington Māori Legal Service and he's just finished this amazing criminal justice report. And so I didn't know anything about him. And he came up and he sat with me after dinner and we sat and talked. My work at that time, as well as treaty work, was in family violence work and sexual abuse and rape work. And he came to talk to me and asked me what I did. And then he asked me if I would like to go and work for him for nothing, for free, for a couple of months in Wellington. So he was really fortunate that I'd just fallen in love with somebody in Wellington. So I thought, oh, well, I can kill two birds with one stone. I can go and hang out with my new girlfriend and I can go and work for this man called Moana Jackson. And it was a defining moment in my life and it absolutely changed my life. And the thing that changed my life was that he taught me such a lot about family violence. I thought I knew a lot about violence. And he took it to a whole different level, the pervasiveness of it internationally and through the system, through the courts and through government. And he provoked in me to develop a really good analysis around violence and its pervasiveness. So yes, we functioned on two levels. There was that level where we argued. I very rarely argued with him, but I have to say, because I want to say this, Annie, when he was moving from Taita to, this is my big bitch really about Raukawa, when he was moving about from Taita and he was selling his house, I was there one day. And he said to me, I said to him, because, you know, if you knew Moana, he had the most fantastic library. And you could go into his house and you could be there all day and just read and not even talk to anybody for days. So when I said to him, where are you moving to? He said, back to Waimana. I said to him, well, what are you going to do with all your books? And he said, well, you can come and you can take some if you like, because we both had the appreciation. And you can have what you like, is what he said. He went like this. Anyway, he sold the damn house. And the next time I saw him was at Waimana, and I went into his room and there were no books, or hardly any books. And I said to him, where are your books? And he said, oh, I gave them to Ngāti Raukawa. So, you know, I never swore at him, and it was like, fuck. What the fuck do you want to go do that for? You promised me that I could have access to some of your books and that you have the best library in the whole country. Why can't? You're not supposed to do that. I just about cried. I gave them to Ani Makaere at Ngāti Raukawa. I thought, wow, next time I see Ani. So I've been moaning about it since, but I promise Ani that I have vented today. So I will leave the whole issue alone and go and see the collection and glory in its beauty. So we travelled quite a lot, extensively. We did a lot of the first work around constitutional transformation in 1998 when he and I, Mereana and Tanga Lawrence, travelled throughout Ngāti Kahungunu and met with 17,000 of our people over a period of 10 months to talk about constitutional transformation within our own iwi. That was a really good body of work and probably some of the best work that we have done. He was remarkable in that work in that he loved to sit and listen to our people. He had 5 questions that we were to ask over that period of time. And we met with everybody from Te Pāo Paretu in the north to Invercargill. We engaged with people in New York, Ngāti Kahungunu people in New York and London and Hawaii, all over the world, to talk about constitutional transformation. It was a bittersweet exercise though, because first of all, our dickhead of a iwi authority, I don't like iwi authorities, I've hated them all my life, I think they're bullshit. They are, come from the Crown's imagination and desire to control us. Iwi authorities, and anyway, we did this project for our iwi authority who promptly took the hard work that was involved. First of all, they cut our funding. 3/4 of the way through the project, they cut our funding. And it was only because of people like Annette, Moana, Megan Joe, and other people, they funded us for the rest of the project, which took 3 months. Over the Christmas period, we holed up at my house, and he wrote the final draft. In February, we gave it to our iwi authority, who promptly threw it on the floor, and then totally and utterly disregarded it. And so it was a bittersweet exercise, but the best part of that was working with him, with our people. And it taught me that. It taught me that you must always go. He taught me you must always go back to what the people want. And that where you think that something is really difficult to explain and that our people won't respond, there is a way. And it is about how you ask the question. How you ask the question and how you treat the people. People loved him, women loved him. I was amazed at his tangi. One of the things that blew me away was the big ope would come, huge ope with, 50 women in them, and they'd come around the corner and come down the pathway, and every one of them would be weeping and crying for him. I was thinking, oh my God, this man who was famously celibate and didn't have relationships of an intimate nature as far as I knew. I don't know. Annette Sykes might know more about this than I do. But hundreds and hundreds of women came to weep for him at his tangi. And so So those are some of the things that I love the way that he was with women. He was really happy to follow us. He was always happy to put his trust in women and to follow them to a place, and not always be, it was the trust that he had in us. Lots and lots of sitting at home in front of my fireplace, arguing and talking, and sometimes me in absolute disbelief at some of the things that he used to say. And just one more story before I give it to you, Annie. He was at times quite random. We taught together in treaty work and decolonisation work for a long time. And one day we were sitting at Wairoa, and there were all these Pākehā Māori people that come to our course. And he just turned to me and really quietly he said, "I'm not going to teach Pākehā people anymore." And I went, What? He goes, "I'm not going to teach Pākehā people anymore, starting today." I said, you can't do that. There's all these Pākehā people in the audience. What are you going to do? He said, you should get up and tell them. You should get up and tell them that we're not going to do that today. I said, piss off. You made the decision. You tell them, you big sook. He was a big sook. You big sook. And so he got up and really diplomatically and quietly said to them, "I'm sorry, but we are not going... We have decided that we are not going to teach Pākehā people anymore. It's too hard. Isn't it, Mereana? It's too hard. We don't want to do it anymore. I'm sorry, but those of you who are Pākehā will have to go." 4 hours later, the last Pākehā left. After they had argued with us and begged and all sorts of things. But, I quite liked that about him, that he would be like that and he would just chop something off and that was it. He had set a boundary, he wasn't going to do it anymore, and there was no negotiating. So, yeah, I loved him, and I knew that he loved me too. Kia ora.
Kia ora te whare, kei te tautoko au i ngā mihi, kia koutou o Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Toa Rangatira. E manaaki nei tēnei kaupapa, hei whakamanahia, hei whakamaumahara hoki tētahi o ngā tino tō o te ao Māori, o te kaupapa e kia nei ko te waka whakarei mo tō tātou nei tino rangatiratanga. Kei te mihi hoki ki a koe, Sharon, ko ro te wā I tūtaki ai a koe, I maumahara te wā kei te tangihana a Tuaiwa Rickard, I reira koe ki te whakamanahia hoki I ana kaupapa mō tō tātou nei iwi Māori, ana I runga tau atu āhutanga kei te mihi ati au ki a koe. Ana ko tāku nei mihi whakamutunga ki a koe e te pāpara whata. Ko koe tētahi o ngā tāngata o te ao I pupuri te Māori, o te whakaro hohunu, me pēhea te huarahi tōtika, hei tūtonu o tātou nei mana Māori motu hake. Ia rā, kei roto I te pū manawa o ngā whānau, o ngā hapu, o ngā iwi. Mā tērā tauira, hei whai whakaro te kāwanatanga, anei te kaupapa tōtika mo te katoa. I thought this was a mana wahine session, not a remembrance session. But I think Moana's commitment to mana wahine stems from his mother. My first time ever meeting Moana was having the privilege of being taken to his home. Sid was still married at that time, Deirdre Tahana, and he'd lived in Rotorua with us. Unfortunately, Sid was playing for Waka. I'm from Rotoiti, so notwithstanding that, we were still activists together in a movement for quite significant political change. At that time, I was still a student, but seeking the establishment of a Māori union. And during that time, there was a lot of threats to the freezing works longevity in the homes of the Jackson whānau. So in the middle of the night, I was taken down by Sid, and this is what he said: "I want you to meet my brother. He's completely different to me. He's really soft and gentle. but his mind has the ability to take us on a journey to tomorrow, where I'm more worried about the struggle for today. And when I went to their home, I don't know if you knew Sid, or Jim, as a lot of people called him then, we arrived at 2 o'clock in the morning to his mum's home. And I was embarrassed because it had taken us all of 6 hours to get there. We'd stopped everywhere along the way from Rotorua to their home. And his mum got up and she cooked us a big feed, and Moana got up to make scones for us. And I'll never forget that, you know, I think I was 17 or 18 at the time, and I was there with someone who I was awe-inspired by, Sid Jackson. He was an activist, but he was one of the greatest intellects of the Ngāi Taurira student movement of that time. He was married to one of the most beautiful women in the world, both in her āhua, but in the way she portrayed the mana wāhine and all she did. And then when he took me back to the embrace of his mother, it all kind of made sense why he was adored by women. This is Sid I'm talking about. But also he had the deepest respect for women who had obviously been central in ensuring the survival of their family. At that meeting, Moana and I talked about the Petihana Māori, which has been celebrated this year, because I was a member of the Te Reo Māori Society at that stage, post the Petihana having been completed. So I wanted to, I was researching as part of that a paper that I went on to form my thesis at university for the establishment of the Māori Language Bill, which is what I devoted most of my university to doing, because I'd been schooled in Singapore and I wanted Māori to be an official language. I just wanted it. Because I couldn't understand why Dun Mihaka and Diane Preston had been arrested while we were at university and had been denied the right to use our reo in court. Moana had told me, and you know, he was a real straight-looking dude back then. You know, he wore shorts and kind of socks up to here, you know. And Sid wasn't like that. Sid wore kind of rugby kind of short socks, you know, and he just exuded masculinity. And Moana told me that he'd been knocking in Remuera by himself at the behest of Kathy Jews. It's all right, just take this, knock on the door, go, kia ora, I'm here to seek the support for our Māori language. It's the most beautiful language. Can you sign your name here? And then he said, this is the first house he'd knocked on. They'd all left him at the door. He didn't know that, of course, it was a setup because this was a particularly racist home that everyone knew about. The person who answered the door said, 1 moment, please. He went into the kitchen and came back with a bread knife and then threw that at Moana's head. And Moana actually got stabbed. So this is my first introduction to the explanation from Moana about his commitment. And Sid telling me he's the soft and gentle man, and yet he'd forgiven the Pākehā for doing that. I said, did you make a complaint to the police? No, I just thought that that was what would happen if we actually confronted the racism of people and why they wouldn't support the growth of our language. So all this happened at 2:15 in the morning in a little whare in a home of unionists. And when I say unionists, they eat, sleep and talk unionism. So did I. I came from Kawarau. And everyone striked back then for our rights, and everyone worked together as collectives back then. From that moment on, I think we were destined, because I was working a lot with Sid in the Ahi Ka movement, and then in the Kotahitanga o Wairiki movement, and then in the movement for Tino Rangatiratanga to achieve constitutional change, to take a role. Because there were codes of conduct back then that were imposed on us by our leadership, like Sid and Hana, and Hilda and Hone. No smoking, no having sex with other people's wives and husbands, which we broke all the time. No, and for me and Moana, there was an added responsibility not getting ourselves into positions where we couldn't advise our people when they were arrested. Remembering at this stage, Moana didn't have a practicing certificate. I was in my 2nd or 3rd year of law, and we never had these things. But we knew during this period of enormous change that in confronting the system, those at the front line would be the most likely to be impacted upon and frustrated by efforts of the state, mainly the police, to avoid that. And Moana had no experience with this. Can I say he was an intellect? He talked about it, but he wasn't the practitioner of the frontline struggle. And he was protected in that role because Sid had other ideas for him. And that was he was there to protect us when we got arrested. And that was really important. So that was his nurturing role. I've listened over the last couple of days to how people have described him. The descriptors have been Moana, others have been Papa Moana, others have been Mo, which is what I've always known him as Mo. Others have talked to him about, in other ways, you know, the son of Kahungunu, the son of the Indigenous Peoples Movement. But I always felt that he was just Moana because he had all of those complexities to him. One of the things when my teaching of feminism from people like Mirasazi and Tuaiwa Rickard was to recognise that the feminine divine is actually not just possessed by women, that you will meet characters in your life, men in your life, like Whata, like Moana, like my Kraua Te, who possess this understanding of the feminine divine and that balance that subsists within each of us that gives creative force to that feminine divine in all that you do. And I think that's one of the most incredible things that he did when he taught. He understood that that feminine divine was actually going to be that which enabled moments of change. You know, those light bulb moments when you know that you have to look in the mirror, not look to the person next door to you that has to make the change. And the change starts in that moment with you making a commitment to te reo or to giving up the power that the kāwanatanga. For me, it was him telling me, they're co-opting you, stop going on those boards that are corporatising you, stop taking the $1,000 a day from the Crown and come home to your people and work for nothing. Those are the kinds of moments that you have to make as a personal conviction to actually achieve the liberation of our country if we're all serious about it. And Moana was the one, I think he was a challenger, but also a supporter, because when you make those kind of commitments, it's really, really hard. Our lives were intertwined because of the kāwanatanga training we'd had in Ture Pākehā. But our lives were also intertwined, I think, because we both came from rural communities with commitments to union collective movements who organised collectively for change and worried about the least most important person in a community rather than the most important person in a community. And I think that cemented our relationships over the years. His philosophies, though, you know, like I heard it yesterday. One of them was papa. You know, it's Papa Tuanuku that guided his development of that philosophy. The P for philosophy, A for assumption, P for praxis, A for action. That philosophical framework guided us in a lot of the reconstruction of tikanga that we were making a commitment to in the 1980s, that have suddenly become sexy because Alice said something about it last year, but actually the kind of philosophical assumptions that they're talking about are about integration and assimilation, which will ultimately mean about the death of our tikanga in our terms, rather than the philosophical reclamation and assumption of reclamation that Moana taught about when he talked about in tikanga. Funny, though, that he looks at the acronym for that from our mother, from Papa Tuanuku. So that feminist divine guided him in all of his conceptual frameworks. Getting back to I know a lot more about the dirt, you know, all this stuff about him being a bit of a celibate is all a bit of a, okay, but that's private. What goes on tour stays on tour. All I can tell you is that men and women that he touched loved and adored him, and they wanted to nurture him. But his work meant that you sacrificed that. You can't have relationships when you're on the front line. And when you do, you've got to ask why a lot of us are single. They get destroyed by the fact of being on the front line. And the only people that are there for you forever are your mothers and your fathers, your brothers, your intimate whānau, your children, and your mates. You know, I want to disimbue you that suddenly you'll have the Māori, Hungaroia Māori coming to support you when Moana and I are getting in trouble at Pākai Tore. We actually rang around for help. Heitia came Taki Anaru came and me and Moana came. But the 400 other Māori lawyers that could have come, they didn't come. They weren't at court when our people were getting arrested, and they weren't helping us when Moana and Ken Mea were under threat of SIS surveillance. So I want to mention some of this, because while that was my time, I think you need to be aware that that reality is still our time now. I still have my phone tapped. Moana and I could hardly talk to each other on our phones. With Jane Kelsey, certainly, anytime we rang Jane Kelsey, it went off, okay? You know, they were number 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the most unwanted list in this country. There was a threat assessment unit list. Sid Jackson was number 1. Hannah Jackson was number 2. Jane Kelsey, I don't know why she was number 3, okay? And then there was a Moana, Hone, Hilda, and I was lucky, I was down the bottom about 9, but we were on that list. You know, and why were we on that list? Because the transformation that we sought to achieve was so threatening to the power base of that period. And to suggest that it's not threatening to them now, I think, is just sleepwalking into our own naivety again, and allowing the imagination of transformation that we want to actually be thwarted by the fact of the recognition that there's a power struggle in place here. And it's not just an intellectual debate. It's about the transfer of the ability to make decisions for and on behalf of our whānau, and with appropriate resources to do that. And any time you ask people with power to transfer that, whether it's an iwi authority or a government department, they are as reluctant to give up power. And that, I think, was Moana's ability. He made you want to give up power, eh? He was that kind of individual that came in such a non-threatening, but most threatening way to facilitate the desire of giving up power, and actually doing that willingly, so that you actually saw yourself and felt good as a human being for recognising that you had been part of an oppressive culture and regime of power that had disenfranchised so many people. So that imbued my relationship with him. At a personal level, I funded him quite proudly through my law firm, because no one else did after they closed down Ngā Kaiwhakamārama i Ngā Ture. No one else would fund him. I think I funded him for about 5 or 10 years, and then over time we've managed to get him supported in different ways. Borum Foundation was the most recent one. That's why I love that report out. I'm going to ask Anne and Nawai. It's really important when Pākehā help us for those things that we meet the obligations that Pākehā expect of us. And I think that's one of the things from this conference I would like to see as a commitment, is that we get that report done in honour, as we've done with this book, of someone who devoted his whole life to having that second report completed before he passed. And then the other things about, you know, because I'm rambling a little bit here, but those are the things that I want us to do for Moana, but what does he want us to do for him? And that's just to live the best lives for ourselves, with our people. I really loved being here. I spoke to Whata. I think we had a bit of a tear. I came here when Whata's dream was planted in an economics lecture that I was doing a long time ago, accounting lecture at Victoria University. Most people don't know I got a BCA, and Whata was one of my most inspirational thinkers. You know, the pathways to tino rangatiratanga are here. You have 2 buildings, a dream for 1,000 Raukawa speakers. You have a dream for this whare Wānanga to substitute the discourse of universities as places of keeping of mātauranga Māori. And then you have a burgeoning generation of X, Y, and Z now that actually don't have to worry about struggle, are imbued into reo Meona tikanga, and now just have to get on with the business of actually developing communities sourced in that. And that's why I really enjoyed the rangatai session yesterday. Can I talk personally though, because political is personal, and we talk about violence. Moana was the best friend for me when I was in a particularly violent situation with a man of the movement. And you got to, I want to say that when you're confronted with personal violence in that way, quite often as someone who's on the front line, you hide that from the world and you don't have many to talk to. But Moana saw it. He confronted the individual that was doing it to me, high-profile Māori leader in the Māori world even now, and actually denied him speaking rights to doing that. And he did that not just because he was my mate, but he saw that the personal violence that I was being subjected to was actually not tika, and that the Māori men in the movement that were promoting that kind of vigorous harm against their partners needed to be actually brought to account. Now that's, I'm talking to the men in the room. How many of you are prepared to do that? When you see that level, and I'm talking, I got my teeth punched out by this individual. I was put into women's refuge 3 times by this individual, and I never saw any Māori men in the movement. Sadly, Sid didn't stand him up. It was only Moana that stood him up. And these are the kinds of brave things that I want to talk about that Moana did. And that's, for me, the epitome of understanding how he has an obligation to protect mana wāhine. That obligation is more than just speaking about it. It's taking actions to do it. But then creating theoretical frameworks that actually are born from the feminine divine, are guided by that to its fruition. And then you measure the performance of that transformation process by whether, in fact, you've actually achieved the theory of papa in a way that means the dynamic of our mother, Papa Tuanuku, will guide us all into the future. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, Annette, and I'm just acknowledging the generosity of Moana's whānau that was mentioned, to giving back to the coming generations, a remarkable man in that he loved to sit and listen to the people and place emphasis on how you ask the question and how you treat the people. Annette, coming back to that comment around the commitment to the publication of the second report, that segues nicely into my next pātai for the panel. I'm keen to hear what some actions are that you would like to see for others to continue on with Moana's work. I'll start with you, Whaia, since you're right next to me.
Every action, and it sort of came up yesterday, what can you do, and picking up on Annette's thing, the personal and the personal is the political, but the political is personal, so you have to do both. And I think the rangatahi panel yesterday talked about a range of actions. One of the things that I've been reflecting on lately is that it's really easy to get comfortable in your role, and like in a university that talks about re-indigenisation, which I struggle with if it's not partnered with decolonisation. You can have little hubs of brownness within a Western institution, but actually you can get very comfortable in that, and it doesn't change the structures, it doesn't change the fact that it's a business. And so one of the things that I've made a commitment to over the last year is to become more radical, more outspoken, and that I went to a conference and it said, it's no good training professionals anymore, we have to train activists. And I think that's quite a good step that we have to think through. At the last conference Leonie and I were at, I recalled Wharehuia, I know you're going to think Milra, but I'm going to say Hemara, who was a mate in my Wellington days. And after I had 2 kids in quite rapid succession, I went from wearing sort of flash high heels to dreaming of comfortable shoes. And Wharehuia said to me, because I said, I'm going off to buy some comfortable shoes. And he said, oh, stop it. When you're thinking like that, ring me up immediately and I'll come around and snap you out of it. And he said, we've got to be in with our discomfort. And so I think that we can get really comfortable in our institutions that we work in. And we work in institutions sometimes for good reasons, but we have to be always thinking of our discomfort and the tension of the discomfort of being in the, if we're comfortable, we probably need to be have our mana motuhaki reinvigorated within us.
Kia ora. I just want to pick up something Annette said before I answer that question around, you know, I was talking about mana wāhine, and I talked to Ngaropi Cameron. I mean, Moana's relationship for me is not necessarily with me, it's with Taranaki. And it always has been, like Mereana and Te Merenga, the work that you've always done for our people. And so I said to Ngaropi, is there something you want me to say around Moana's relationship? And I wrote it down. So I just want to quickly read that, because I think it's really important that it comes from a collective understanding. And what she wrote was, Moana understood what other Indigenous nations already know, that Indigenous peoples will not be defeated because the woman will never surrender. Moana, like our tupuna, Wiremu Te Rangitaki, had as his first line of resistance, recovery, restitution and defence, the warriors of whom were Wāhine toa, Wāhine tiaki tangata. And so I think in terms of mana wāhine, that really encapsulates for us, particularly at Tūtama Wāhine o Taranaki, but for women of Taranaki, that relationship. Because it's a relationship that we've always known, mai rāno, and it's continued with many people into this generation. In terms of things to do, I mean, definitely, I agree with Annette, that new report must be released, and I'd say within the next few weeks, because we're all waiting for it. We're all waiting for it. We know the stats. Moana started sharing them quite early. You know, the difference between the 87 report and this report is that for Māori men, the numbers were 51% then, they are 51, 52% now in terms of the incarceration levels, population, but for Māori women it went from something like 1 or 2%, I think, at that time, in 87, to 63% of the prison population for women is Māori women. And I just had a conversation yesterday with Annette from Tūtama Wāhine. She said, ask Annette and Ani what we're going to do about the fact another Māori woman has been put away for 18 months for benefit fraud, and her child has been given to someone to care for by the Ministry of Children against her wishes, that the child should have gone to the kuia. So it's ongoing, and so there's a real urgency for that work to be released. The other thing I think it would be really those 10 ethics that Moana had. Ethic of prior thought. This is just when he talked at our conference. There are many, many others. Ethic of prior thought. You know, have faith and believe in our tupuna knowledge. The ethic of moral right, choice, like doing things for the right that is morally right for our people. The ethic of imagination, which I talked about. The ethic of change. Everything we should do should be transformative. The ethic of time, we should take the time to do things properly and do them in the time that they're really needed. The ethic of power, our responsibility and obligations to understanding power and to understand that we have a reciprocal relationship. The ethic of courage, and he kept telling people to be brave, to be courageous. The ethic of honesty, the ethic of modesty, and the ethic of celebration of the incremental, those small changes that we make. But the incremental changes are not the destination. And actually, when we talk about doing something, I was at the conference where Papaarangi talked last week, and she talked through the framework of the zones in the Mātiki Mai report, the zone of kāwanatanga, rangatiratanga, and the relational zone. And it's the first time in a very long time that I heard anyone in such a big forum draw back on those ways of understanding the relationships. And so we have to talk the talk everywhere we do it. We have to be talking it in every opportunity, every public opportunity. And then I just wrote down some reflections last night around being unwavering, around holding firm, about ensuring that we are supporting those in the movement, that we are building activism, that we are good listeners, that we are patient but challenging, that equity, we were told last week by Chelsea Bond, equity is not rangatiratanga, it is not sovereignty. We do that inside the systems to make change, and that's what Papaarangi was saying. That's in a kāwanatanga relational zone, but the ultimate zone is rangatiratanga and mana motuhake. That is where we're heading, that is where we're driving, and that's what we need to do.
Okay, well, I belong to a rōpū ko Te Atakura, a treaty education rōpū, decolonisation rōpū, and Moana and I mentored them for the last 7 years. And I think that one of the things that he would want us to continue, or to get to a stage of being able to mentor the ones that are coming up, to grow those activists. I entirely agree we need to move from where we're at. We're really, really good, and we've become really good through colonisation at meeting the best practice standards of Pākehās. We have some of the best lawyers, some of the best doctors, some of the best everything. And we can do that. We know how to do that standing on our head. Reaching goals that have already been defined for us by the Pākehā world. We know how to do that stuff. We need to take it a little bit further than that and come back to our own mana and come back to crafting our own work. You know, Moana did a lot of work. He did lots of work, say, with if you look at some of the people that have spoken this weekend, they came through the student movement, Māori student movement, that he worked with and dedicated a lot of time to. Now, a lot of those young people are activists in their own hapu. And so what is it that he taught us? To educate. He taught me to educate, to not be afraid to take action, and to always reflect on what you have done so that your next strategy does not fall into some of the things that you did over here. To never be afraid of reflecting, never be afraid of pulling apart your own actions. The greatest thing in the relationship with him was the ability to sit and talk and deconstruct everything that we had done. So for me, it is about going out and educating and taking that, going out and talking to our people, explaining how something works, explaining the impact of what that thing is on us, listening to the stories, because for us, stories are not about, contempt. Stories are about the familiarity of change and the potential of change that we all have, our stories together. Yeah, so for me it's about education, action and reflection. To think strategically, to analyse strategically and to take strategic action. Stop sitting on our asses and thinking, oh man, it's all good in my world, my mokopunas are achieving, we're okay. And they're just dumb buggers, little buggers. Sometimes they're just really dumb. My mokopuna came home, he's 4 years old, his name is Ezra. My grandson rang up last couple of weeks ago and he said, Mum, Nan, Ezra's been kicked out of kindergarten. And I said to her, a 4-year-old kicked out of kindergarten, what is the matter with these people? I said to him, come for dinner tonight. Come for dinner and bring Ez with you. So I have quite a close relationship with this great-grandson. He's been my Ngāti Porou boy since he was born. He's got the hazel eyes, he's got the red hair. And as soon as we saw each other, we both went, yes, yes, you're Ngāti. So he's my little Ngāti Porou grandson. So he occupies a special place in my heart. He came over and I got him at the dinner table, fed him up, and I said to him, he's digging into his peaches and ice cream, and I said to him, Ezra, how come you got kicked out of kindergarten this week? How come? And he said, well, Nan, I was just really angry. And I said, so what did you do? And he said, I was really angry because the lady, the I don't know, a supervisor, the kaiako, she wouldn't let me go to the wharepaku. And she didn't listen to me. She didn't listen to me when I wanted to go to the wharepaku. And I just about pooed myself. And just tears coming out of his eyes. And I don't want to poo myself. You know, this is a baby who just got potty trained and made those achievements. I don't want to poo myself. I didn't want to poo myself, and he just started crying. And I said, it's okay. Nanny will go in the morning and I'll deal to her. Yeah, so he stayed at home and I went down and I said, you don't listen to him. He tells me that you didn't listen to him and that he had asked you 3 times to take him, that he wanted to go, because if he wants to leave the room, he has to go and tell her that he's leaving the room, going to the toilet. And he almost pooed his pants, and for him, that's a big thing, you know, for a Māori child to crap their pants and to know that they, you know, about those things around your own cleanliness and things like that. And he just started these big tears, you know. I was going to poo my pants then. And I don't want to poo my pants. So it's like you have to, you know, what I admire about that is that he's 4 years old and he got angry enough to be kicked out of kindergarten. And then in the end, somebody listened.
I got a different framework, but similar, that I want us to keep in mind. I think it's a Jackson whānau free, I'm not too sure, but education, organisation, liberation and action is certainly what we did. Moana focused on education in everything we did. So we must maintain wānanga like this. I'd like to say I'm going to make a tono for one of the 3 next year to be back in Aotearoa. You know, that has to happen, and we need to ensure that the constitutional transformation corridor is designed in those settings for the audience that we are trying to achieve personal commitment to. So we need to organise for that to occur, so using that as an example. But there are other ways of also achieving change in other levels. Before Moana died, I was, and I'm sorry, Hatia, but, you know, there was this unfinished work. So he did a mana wāhine affidavit for me for the Waitangi Tribunal, but I would like to see those affidavits published in a book like we put through. The work that's stimulated from Moana's incisive analysis on the state of mana wāhine, we need to do some more mahi. Ani, you've done a brilliant kōrero on that this year. Don't wait for the Waitangi Tribunal. We just provide our own forums for the publications of our own work. The Waitangi Tribunal has been blessed to have that, but I also think we need to treasure the work that has done. The Waitangi Tribunal is also having a transformation process in the constitutional inquiry, which is going to be steered by Chief Judge Karen Fox. And I think that's also a particular forum for education, but also organising for change by encouraging institutions like here to develop constitutional change ideology for us to occur. For those of us in the system, I don't know, I've got this role at Auckland University. I'm trying to do what Moana said, you know, don't teach Pākeha's tikanga, but we've got to find a way that we can teach Pākehas to be decolonised and understand that they need to give up power for tikanga to thrive. So I'd like to see joint ventures from those institutions like Auckland University, Otago University, Victoria University and Waikato, with this institution. So we bring our Māori students, even if it's a summer school, and we look at ways we can inculcate in those things particular projects to assist, you know, some of the things that are happening in our communities. I know that quite often I'm not doing things because I want to, it's just because the community wants to do that. For me personally, Moana and I dreamed about establishing habilitation centres. And since he's passed away, I've been working with Billy McFarlane to try and encourage relationships so that we can get either through a privatisation process or a Crown resource process, a habilitation centre for our whānau who are in jails so they come home. I don't want DTU to be done inside the wai anymore. I don't want drug programs. I want them to be done in tikanga-based programs that are about oranga and about well-being and about whānau participation. So I'm doing that. And that was one of the things Moana wanted. I'm hoping that Kahungunu, ours is going, Te Arawa's is going. He wanted one in Kahungunu. So I'd like to see that happen. Ours is being done under the auspices of Te Tikanga Aotearoa Trust, and we've got our new DTUs and Angi 2 program, which is about well-being, but about meeting the standards that they require inside to release our people outside. And I want that to happen. I want also the oranga tamariki to devolve our whānau back to our care. And there's been a lot of rhetoric about it, but nothing substantively has changed. They effectively ignored the recommendations from the Waitangi Tribunal. And it's just been horrific for me this week to read that there's been more rapes while in state care. There's been more disenfranchisement of our whānau. So that's another big kōrero that Moana devoted. This has all happened in the last 2 years of his walking on this earth with us. And I want to commit to those things being dealt with. And that, don't wait for the iwi authority to do that. They have not got the capacity nor the commitment. They are all into tino rangatiratanga for economic development. They aren't there for tino rangatiratanga for whānau regeneration, for the overcoming of the hatred, the racial hatred that we've had imposed on our whānau, for the denial of our mothers to nurture their children. Don't wait for your iwi authority to do that. They just won't do it. So you have to be really clear, get some like-minded whānau, and so your hui should be about that. In terms of women incarceration rates, I really want to take a case to the Waitangi Tribunal and then to the International Courts of Human Rights, because I can't stomach it anymore. When I first started on the Roper Report in 1980-something, 8% of the prison population were women. Okay, that were Māori, 8%. Julia, I know in the violence stats, we're something like 93% of those that are committing violent crimes are Māori women right now, and we're at 62% of the population. That was what I got told 2 weeks ago. That is unacceptable. When I was doing the Roper Report, we were 8%. And you can't tell me we suddenly all got bad in the last 40 years to those numbers that are there. And it's Māori women that are now taking the rap, as I've been told, for some of the organised crime that our people are involved in. They're the drivers. They're taking the rap. So there's some internal development amongst our whānau about why they're putting their women and their children into roles like that will see them disconnect from their whenua and from their children. So I could go on all day, but these are all the things, these are the 4 things that I worked with Moana before he passed. And then the other thing is the constitutional change dynamic. We must start in our own hapu, because they sometimes are the places of least resistance, but they are actually having their power diverted away to these committees that are being set up by kāwanatanga, whether it's in the environment space, you're going to have these regional committees, or whether it's going to be in the oranga tamariki space, we're going to have little regional committees. We need to get our hapu mobilised so they demand participation and control of those functionary roles to ensure the mana motuhake of the ideals are being developed. And, we need more of our people coming to this institution. I encourage a lot of my students, do your law degree, but come to Wānanga for 2 years and then come out and work. And if you can't come to this one, the other one I'm encouraging is Te Whare Takiura in Auckland, because Auntie Ka and Uncle Tom have got a good philosophy. But, we got to do those things. And just be conscious of the philosophies too that are being offered in some of the Te Reo Meona Tikanga programs. They are sometimes just tick the box to get the money from the kawana so that you can actually teach reo to Pākehā. So we just got to ask ourselves those things as well. So kia ora.
I just want to say something quickly on the end of that. For all of those things, one thing I think we need to do is we need to stop using the Māori names for these organisations. You know, Oranga Tamariki is not Oranga Tamariki, and we need to stop giving them the privilege of our kupu. They are the ministry for children, supposedly, and I think that's something, you know, language is important. That's something that I always got from Moana and from many others. Languaging is important, and we need to pull back them using our kupu for things that they are not capable of doing and they choose not to do. The system itself is not broken. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to incarcerate us. And I agree with Annette and all of those movements that we need, and that is what we're doing in that kāwanatanga space, but the rangatira space is abolition. And there are very few of our people really advocating that, but we need to step in behind those people that are willing to put they're on the line, and at the same time do these things to actually support our people who are coming out of these situations. And so, you know, I think it's really important that we do, and these things we can all do every day. We can do this, they're simple things to do every day. They're thinking things and they're just talking things. And, you know, Mereana talking about her mokopuna, you know, that stuff. You know, that should not be happening in this day and age, as should the incarceration of our women at the rate that it's happening should not be happening. You know, and so the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, which is to keep us in chains. And coming from a people that were removed from our whenua in chains, that is not new. They've been doing it since 1860. And so, you know, I just really wanted to pick up on that thing of reminding ourselves that the end, you know, picture is actually abolition in that context, and that's what we should be targeting to go. And I remember doing this mahi with Linda Smith, and she did an exercise that she said Sid and these ones used to do with her, and that is, what do we do tomorrow when the Tino Rangatiratanga flag goes up and the other flag comes down? What are we ready to do tomorrow? What do we do when we wake up? When we have rangatiratanga, what are we going to do when we wake up? And we did that session and everyone's like, And we even had some ministry people say, oh, we'd probably do the same thing but with our people. And we're like, no, go back, go to sleep again and wake up again.
Tēnā koutou, and thank you all for those very useful action points that we can take home to implement within our own whānau. I've noted always thinking of the discomfort, ihoa, wise words, and the urgency for this new report, this piece of work to be released as well. The 10 ethics that Moana created, for lack of a better word, to be utilised as guidelines for change. Unwavering, holding firm, and the importance of mentoring our next and current generations as well. Education, action and reflection, and iwi, hapu and whānau-led responses to whakamana, our own. The only regret from this session is that there's never enough time e hoa mā, and I just want to note that Pōtikanga do run these constitutional transformation wānanga quarterly. We host them online and around the motu, so please respond when you get the next email invite. Kia ora. Nō reira, kei te mihi ki a koutou mō tō taima me tō aroha ki tēnei kaupapa. Kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your mātauranga, your reflections, your experiences with us. Thank you to all of you in person and our audience online as well. I believe now that we are about to break for Paramanawa. Do we have any updates? Looking at, I've got a note. No.
Hey!
Thank you. The first time I've heard that song sung properly since we composed it in 1984. Kia ora.